And so now we have this new way, another way into this work for preparing our students for the 21st century, and that's what you're going to hear from our colleagues in Westport. 3 years ago, we hosted, because Westport asked us to, a think tank at Teachers College. And we had about 65 Westport folks here, and thinkers and leaders who are researchers and thought leaders coming in here to provoke and inspire thoughts around 21st century teaching and learning. So that was another way in. It all started from, what do we need to do? We have to do something. And here we start. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Elliot Landon, and the superintendent of schools from Westport, and Liz Kahn, the director of K-612 curriculum and instruction, to tell their story about Westport 2025.
And in that conversation, we learned that we had issues that went beyond what we had been doing, issues that focused on the future. We had, among those who were present, businessmen, governmental leaders, we had people who were technologically adept, and we walked away from that with the feeling that something was missing. Following that, and simultaneous with it, we did a lot of reading. We sent people out on a lot of conferences. We listened to Tony Wagner. We engaged with Thomas Friedman, and The World is Flat. And we looked at what we were doing. And we were pleased with what we were doing, except for the fact that we were doing the same old 5-year curriculum study, every one of our curriculum areas. And we thought we were being progressive and innovative. And in fact, if you looked at our student success rate, by every measure, we were doing beautifully. College acceptances, SAT scores, our Connecticut Mastery Test scores, we were the best. And then, some of our kids, a group of our kids at the high school, engaged themselves with the support of our teachers in the Moody's Math Challenge, which is sponsored by Moody's. We had a number of teams of youngsters who took on a real-world challenge that was of rather great significance. It had to do with Social Security and the ability to maintain Social Security into the future. These kids worked with the support of our teachers on a Saturday from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. They were not allowed to have any other assistance from any of our staff, only to take what they knew, what they had learned in math, science, social studies, in language arts, and pull it all together to put together a resolution of the problem that was presented. Well, those kids did incredible work. Real-world problem solving. They were limited, of course, to only a few. And they went on, actually, to win the Moody's Math Challenge. There were 4 youngsters on that team. They split the award to $20,000. But that forced us to think further. Why aren't we doing this throughout the system? While we were concentrated on what we always do, we felt we were lacking a vision for where we were going. We were doing the, as I said, the same old. So, beginning of school, when all of our teachers came together for convocation on the first day about 4 years ago, I addressed our teachers. And I said that, I know how well we do. I know how pleased the community is with the work we have done. But I was really concerned that our students were not necessarily being prepared adequately for the 21st century. And my fear was that based on all the research, all we'd heard, all we'd seen, that in a globally competitive environment, our kids might very well be lacking the skills that we would hope they would have in order to be successful. And that had to do with creativity and problem solving and communication skills, with a global awareness and an ability to compete with the millions of students coming out of China and India, South Korea, and Finland, and nations across the globe who took a whole different attitude and approach nationally towards education and saw education for the 21st century, giving kids the kinds of skills they need to be highly competitive, outracing our kids across the board, and we, in our limited way, how could we help our kids to be equally competitive? So with that, I challenged our teachers and said, I hope that we can move forward and look at how we can improve our instruction in ways that are different than what we've done in the past. And with that, I was fortunate to have Lynn Chain as a director of secondary education, who has all of those qualities that one would like to see in one who provides leadership: passion for what she does, resilience, an ability to focus sharply and to dream about this 24/7. So Liz has taken us forward with the help of Teachers College and with our incredible staff. We have, I think, I worked in New York State and I worked in Connecticut, and I think we have on our staff some of the finest professionals you can find anywhere, who can compete with anyone. And they too have embraced this in ways that have made what's going on in our district incredibly exciting. So Liz, I leave it to you.
Thank you so much for coming here this morning. And first of all, I would like to, probably on behalf of the whole group, thank Scarsdale. Not only was your presentation exciting, but you've given us a way to constantly be in contact with you. So that's absolutely terrific. Our Westport 2025 vision, that is our sort of mission statement for the vision. And I would like to, before I begin the details of the presentation, mention to you what we consider to be the 5 pillars for the foundation of our Westport 2025 vision. First of all, we wanted to have a K-12 common vision with a common language. We know there's usually 10 to 20% of your teachers who are less afraid of change, and they're always coming forward to take the lead in things. We were determined to reach out to all teachers in the school system and make them a part of this vision, because we wanted all students in the school system to have the opportunity to practice 21st century skills. I'm going to mention each one of these main ideas, and then as I go through the presentation, I will give you the specific details. But I want you to sort of see that these 5 connecting threads. Second of all, we knew we wanted a university partnership. We wanted to be research-based, and we also wanted to have a pair of outside eyes to serve as critical friends to help us as we move forward. We wanted our teachers to be leaders, of course, and so we tried to provide them with many opportunities to do research, to innovate, to design, to collaborate. I think that Mike McGill has alluded, ironically in some cases, to the many things that we have going on in our systems, some of which are internal, many of which these days are external that we have to deal with. So we have tried very hard to show our teachers that we have many initiatives going on, yes, but they are not separate, they are not disparate, they overlap, and the most important one is Westport 2025. And we, of course, wanted to get complete alignment with all of our stakeholders. We reached out not only to all of our teachers and, of course, the board members, but we've done presentations with the community of Westport, and I'll talk about those in more detail. Whoops, I'm going backwards. The first thing we did is, and I have my crib notes down here in case I forget things, we started the Westport 2025 Task Force. As Elliot Landon said about 3 years ago at a faculty meeting, He talked about his Westport 2025 vision. At that point, not completely realized, but he invited teachers and administrators to join with him to create what we were calling a task force. I suppose we could call it a professional learning community, in order to figure out what really is our vision. And Deb mentioned in her presentation, the very first thing we did was take our group of 50 teachers and administrators to Teachers College, I think it was right in this room, for a think tank. We engaged with professors, both nationally and internationally recognized. They served as what TC called provocateurs, we love that word, in order to get us thinking about 21st century education. TC helped us to do a literature review and to provide global contextualization of what the best school systems around the world are doing so that we could get ideas from them. They helped us come to a common language. Before we started working with TC, though, I will tell you one thing our task force did, which in a sense was small but had huge payoffs. Many of you are probably familiar with the book Making Thinking Visible by Rod Richhart out of Harvard University. If you don't know that book, I would say buy it immediately. It will be very helpful to you. Our task force first read that book, Making Thinking Visible. Then they went out into the 8 schools in our district, and they shared these routines for thinking, and we now have K through 12, all teachers talking in the same kinds of terms about making thinking visible and sharing these thinking routines to do work K through 12. Then, with our work with Teachers College, which I'll explain in a few moments, we've got a much more in-depth tool for having a common language. Honoring teachers as researchers and scholars, working with Teachers College as partners, of course, honored the expertise of our teachers. And we were very determined from the beginning to make our work relevant and urgent. So we did come up with a strategic plan which evolved over the last 3 years. We have the central task force. We have a cohort 2 of the task force in each building. And then we have subcommittees running out of that. So we have a very strategic and connected plan to try to get everyone involved. So I mentioned a common vocabulary, and this is what TC was such a help with. The SEI TC folks had already developed a lens for looking at 21st century skills. And the lens is a K-12 framework. And again, I always emphasize K-12 because we want to do this across the system for planning instruction for the 21st century. This is a tool that all of our teachers use to figure out how to incorporate 21st century skills and capacities. We established a team of teachers from Westport to take this lens that TC shared with us at a task force meeting and customize it for Westport. Scarsdale mentioned that not too much can happen in Scarsdale unless it's really organic with their teachers. To a certain extent, that's true in Westport. Had we handed them a lens created by TC and said, here, learn how to use it, that would not have worked at all. That would not have been collegial and professional. We had a team of teachers customize it so that it could work for Westport, and I think that accounted for the buy-in of all of the teachers, that our teachers have really worked on it. This is an overview of our lens. It really takes some time to study it and get to know it, but I'm going to give you a very quick overview. This is the overview. Across the top, I get to use my fancy little plate. Okay, across the top, horizontally, you have the domains: critical, creative, communication, and global. This is not new to any of you in this room. I mean, we're all now talking about the same 21st century skills and capacities. We're just trying to figure out how to do it within the regulations of our school system. Vertically, going down under each domain, you have the various capacities. The one we're almost familiar with is the one under critical thinking. That's basically the Bloom, thank you. I was going to say Bloom board because I'm thinking it's an awful thing from the state. but it's Bloom's taxonomy that it comes from. The more exciting ones are, of course, things like down here under creative, risk-taking and tolerating ambiguity. Oh my goodness, this thing is out of control. Okay, we have moved right along. I'm trying not to touch it. We are moving along to E. Oh, it truly is out of control. The tech, I don't know, why does it keep going?
They're time slides, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, well, I'm supposed to be able to click this slide and make these things happen. Okay, all right, it goes through critical thinking, and then it has to break down for creative thinking. And just to give you an example, the thing works from left to right. On the left-hand side, you have the more simple version of these capacities. On the right-hand side, what we've labeled as global students, you have the more complex you have the more complex version of these standards. It looks like a rubric. We are not using it as a rubric. It is a planning tool for teachers. And what that means is, depending upon the grade level you're dealing with, and depending upon the skills of the individual student, it might be perfectly appropriate for a group of kids to be at the far left, the simpler end, and not move to the far right. So this is more of a planning tool for teachers than a rubric. And just to give you an example of how it works, if we go down, we're in creative thinking now, under tolerate, simply tolerate new conditions. That would be the simplest form of showing agility and adaptability. If you move over to the global student, embrace change eagerly and generate new possibilities. All right, so hopefully I'll touch it. Okay, there we go. So that's creative, communication, and global. This is in your packet that TC gave you. The lens is very small. If you're interested in getting a larger size of the lens that you can really look at, you can email me. I'd be happy to send it to you. Now, the next thing we had to think about is how were we going to get teachers to use the lens? Well, we got a small groups of teachers at first who were interested, and this is Nat Dewey, the physics teacher. This was set up to be a video, but I really don't have time to show that. What we did is create a training video. Nat Dewey worked with a group of other physics teachers at the high school to design.
So I'd like to start by talking about the way we use the lens.
Okay, you're not going to hear that.
For us, the lens
Maybe
is
you are.
How
can we stop this?
And it gave us a focus where we all could begin on the same page. In addition, it gave us structure for our conversation as we proceeded through our discussion.
I don't think this will take up too much time. Thank you, thank you. Okay, if you're desperate to hear this very exciting thing, you could listen to it during lunch, or again, it's a 30-minute training video. If you're interested in it, I could send it to you online. We use this training video throughout our school system. Teachers would look at how you use the lens to design a unit. And he redesigned with his colleagues a physics car crash unit. Okay, now maybe this is going to take off on its own again. No, okay. So what teachers did at first, rather than design new units, they tended to take units that were already very good units, but they wanted to move them forward, and they wanted to incorporate more 21st century skills. So they would get together as a collaborative group, and they would look at their old unit, and they would circle on the lens, as in right there. They would circle on the lens where they thought their old unit was. So there, when Nat was looking at his car crash unit, he said, I think we are asking students, this is not what the teacher does, this is what the students do. We are asking students to ask fact-based questions that show a desire to understand ideas and concepts in deeper ways. Well, that's good. That's not a bad thing. But he wanted to move the students forward. So he said, I'm going to redesign this unit, so we're asking students to ask analytical questions not fact-based, analytical, that make connections and lead to deeper explorations. So when teachers would be redesigning a unit, they would go through the critical lens, the critical, the creative, the communication, and the global, and they would work on redesigning a unit.
We delved into creative thinking, and
there we go. Okay, now I mentioned the task force that we had, the central task force of 50 people, and how important that was. This is how that worked. The task force met 6 times a year at least in a formal way for about 3 hours. They were critical friends who gave feedback to teams of teachers who would redesign units. So a team of teachers might come to the task force and have a unit that was redesigned that they had not taught yet. They could get critical feedback before they even taught it in that case. Or they might come to the task force having taught the redesigned unit, and they would have work samples, and then we would look at the work samples together. We always had our TC partners with us to help us run the small group sessions, and again, to provide that outside group of critical eyes who would help to give us feedback. I mentioned that our focus really is K-12. We wanted to make sure that everyone was involved. And so I'm just going to give you 3 examples very quickly of 3 units, one from each one of the levels that was redesigned. So for first grade, we had a first grade elementary teacher take a TC literacy unit that had already been designed, and she had taught it, and it focused on Common Core skills. She redesigned the TC literacy unit by adding research, she added collaboration, and she added real-world problem solving to a persuasive writing unit. And I am just going to give you an example of how that unit changed. She had been teaching her first graders to write persuasive letters. They were usually about personal things. Here's an example of a first grade letter. Dear Jimmy. Jimmy is this little girl's brother. Dear Jimmy, when I have play dates, please let me and my play date play by ourselves, because it might be unfair to my play date if you play with us. I think there was a message there. Okay, this is an example of a redesigned persuasive letter after the students have worked collaboratively to do research on a real-world issue. Dear Mom and Dad, please don't buy me and my sister and brother plastic water bottles because it is bad for the ocean, and do not break down, and I don't drink all of it. Please don't buy us plastic water bottles. Please buy us reusable bottles. So here you have first graders who have done some research, worked collaboratively, written a persuasive letter on a real-world problem, and they worked in partners to create a video, giving their pitch on video, and this was delivered to a real-world audience of parents. And so here is a young man, he looks like he's talking to a panda, but that panda is in his video behind him. This is the young man who is making a plea for saving endangered species, because that was the thing that he was working on. Alrighty, to give you a 7th grade example, moving into the middle school, we had a 7th grade collaboration of teachers who redesigned one unit to make it performance-based assessment, tackling a real-world problem. After they designed the first unit, they were so excited about the results, they redesigned the entire 7th grade science course to be based on problem-based units. So, what they did in 7th grade, they took a cell biology and human body system unit, and they turned it into a real-life scenario. They asked their students to conduct an outbreak investigation using the same methods as epidemiologists from the Center for Disease Control would use. So obviously students had to apply what they learned about cell biology in order to do that. So the students had to come up with an investigative plan, a final written report with recommendations to the Department of Health, and they had to deliver that during a simulated press conference, which was also videotaped. And just to give you, I gave you a high school example from physics, but because I love this course, I have to give you one more. We have a 9th grade global studies course, which had already been redesigned before we started using the lens, but they redesigned it again. And this is a 9th grade course that does not have traditional midterms or final exams. Those 2-hour blocks are used for performance-based assessments. It does not emphasize coverage. It does emphasize contemporary connections. And the 4th quarter of the course is devoted to case studies. Students work in collaborative groups, and they have to research a problem in a part of the world that has been affected by Western imperialism. And it could be Africa, India, the Mideast, Latin America, or Southeast Asia. So they do a case study, they work on it all 4th quarter, and then they develop a written report, they give a presentation, and again, the presentation is presented to a real-world audience. All right, so I think you're seeing that the centerpiece of our Westport 2025 vision is to try to get all teachers involved in collaborative work using 21st century skills and redesigning units. Now, aside from that, we have a number of initiatives that I think kind of circle around our main idea, and I'm just going to go through these very quickly for the sake of time. We have implemented Singapore Math, K through 5, which of course gives kids a deeper number sense and therefore more ability to solve real-world problems. We have Project Perseverance, K through 5, which we just began this year. That is cohort 2 in each one of the elementary buildings, and they are researching ways to provide a classroom environment and instructional strategies that will help students with perseverance. Something is going on someplace out there.
Tearing down the building.
Oh, resilience and adaptability. I can handle this. That's right. Okay, Project Resilience 9 through 12. This began as a subcommittee out of our task force. Now we have 3 guidance counselors who every 3 weeks send out material online to 9 through 12 parents and students, again, giving tips for how to help their child build resilience. The last thing they just sent out was Angela Duckworth, who I'm sure you're familiar with. She created those 2 wonderful tests, a test of resilience for students and one for parents. So this got sent out suggesting that students and parents each take those tests and then discuss how well they did and talk about resilience. And that is going to be moving down into the middle school. Right now the middle school is left out, but we're going to help them to be resilient too. Okay, we have had, again, K-5 literacy project has been implemented, well, at our school K-5, I'm going to say the Teachers College Literacy Project has been implemented K through 5 in our school system. This fall, we are bringing in that reading and writing project for all of the middle school language arts teachers, but we're doing it with a twist. We had our TC literacy presenter present working with our TC Lens consultants so that we're bringing the best of both worlds, Common Core Standards and 21st Century, into the literacy program in the middle school. We've introduced problem-based learning in the middle schools, and we introduced that about 3 years ago. Interestingly enough, we visited Scarsdale, and we looked to see what they were doing with their problem-based learning. And as we all know, there's a big difference between problem-based and project-based. So just to give you one of our examples, the 8th grade class a year or 2 ago decided they would focus on revitalizing downtown Westport. They picked that because that is a project the town of Westport is trying to implement. How do we revitalize our downtown? The 8th grade students worked in collaborative teams. They researched the history of Westport. They researched other towns in our area, what they had done to their downtown area. And they ended up presenting a written research report. They delivered it orally using digital presentation skills, and they delivered it to a real-world audience in the auditorium of one of our middle schools, which included people like the planning and zoning team from Westport. Ultimately, one team was chosen as having the best ideas, and that team actually went to an evening planning and zoning meeting to present their ideas to that group. We've introduced STEM at the middle school and high school. Elliot already mentioned the Stable Spectacular Challenge, which we continue to do, and it's very exciting. I mentioned early on in one of our 5 pillars the importance of teachers as leaders, so I'll just mention a few teacher leader committees. I mentioned to you the Lens Revision Committee, which enabled teachers to stamp what TC had done as their own product. We now have a K-12 Strategic Collaboration Committee, researching instructional practices, assessments, and rubrics for the teaching of collaboration. We've just begun a K-12 Creativity and Innovation Committee to do the same kind of thing. Again, I want to emphasize these are K-12 committees. We have integrated the Lens into our Atlas planning software. I know many of you use the Atlas software. We just started using it. We're putting all of our units K through 12 in, but that's helpful. All teachers across the system now can be helped in both vertical and horizontal articulation because they can see what's being done. And as you know, in Atlas, you can download the various standards and the teachers can click on them and connect to them. So of course, we downloaded the 21st century skills and we can go in and see where they're being taught in the various places in the school system. I talked about alignment with stakeholders. We had this past spring a community conversation. We had over 350 parents turn out for it. We're planning something we're calling a parent university. We're going to be teaching quote-unquote 30-minute classes in 21st century skills and giving parents a taste of what it would be like if you were in a class where you were being taught those skills. We have a number of pilot projects going on. As far as Dale mentioned, you start small and you see how it goes. You can't jump too far ahead. So we have 7 teachers at the high school in science and math who are doing a pilot on standards-based grading. We just introduced it this year, had a special session at night for the parents. So far, the parents absolutely love it, and they're asking when the whole high school is going to go in that direction. Well, that may take us a while to do something like that, but we are piloting online portfolios in the high school, and the portfolios are set up so that we ask kids to put work in the portfolios. This has been being done to an English class, but the English teachers are asking them to bring in work from all of their classes and organize it under the 4 domains. So they're organizing and reflecting on their work around the domains of critical, creative, communication, and global. And they're writing reflections about how they see those thinking skills going across the curriculum. Our ultimate goal is to have all students doing online portfolios organized around the 21st century skills. We've got an interdisciplinary digital curriculum pilot going on. We have 20 kids who we gave iPads to. They move as a group. They're from 9th grade English, social studies, and biology. And their teachers are designing curriculum on the iPads. The students are using the iPads constantly, and we're trying to monitor how much that may help them in terms of their learning. We are rolling out the student lens at the high school and the middle school this year, as well as report card comments. So we're trying to get teachers used to using their online grading system to make comments about how well their students are doing in 21st century skills or how they might improve. And there's our lens. Hopefully you recognize that it's supposed to be a brain around the outside. There's also a lens because it has the little stem there. And we did pull students into designing this. The brief glimpse you saw of the lens teachers use, it is very educational type of language, and we thought students might not resonate with that. So we tried to create a lens where it's more simple and straightforward. Last spring, again, we had a committee of teachers who created a student lens. Then, in the spring of the year, they took their version of student lens around to 20 different classes at the high school, and kids gave them feedback, and then they revised based on the feedback from the kids, and we are rolling this lens out at Staples first, then at the middle schools. That was going to be a video that you were going to see.
So that's that, and we got into the research.
Because because we just don't have the time. But again, I can send you that video. It was a video of problem-based learning. I mentioned alignment with all stakeholders. We created this is just one little sample from the matrix. We created a matrix that we're sharing with our staff, showing the connection between 2025 Lens, our new teacher evaluation plan, which of course we're forced to implement, the Common Core Standards, which we're implementing, and NEASC. If you're in New York, you might not be familiar with NEASC. NEASC is the New England Association for Secondary Schools. They have to accredit our high school. And in the midst of everything else, we are doing our self-study for NEASC this year, and we'll have our evaluation next year. But we are trying to go through and connect how those things, yes, we've got a lot on our plate, but they're not all totally different things. They can be connected. And we created a visual to make that more apparent. You've got the big circle on the outside, Westport 2025. You have the domains on the outside, and then on the inside we've encapsulated some of those other things that we need to do. And this is my last slide, or almost last slide for you. We're very excited about a global partnership we have with the Watchung Institution in Singapore. They visited us in the spring, and there you see our advanced culinary class created a lovely luncheon, and there are some others at lunch with our Singapore partners. Here's the task force, and we had a panel discussion as part of the task force, and we shared, our view of 21st century teaching and learning. And then there was a lot of class visits, and there is one of our Singapore delegates visiting a science class at Staples High School. So this partnership continues. We were awarded a 2-year research grant from the National Institute of Education in Singapore for Watchung schools and for Westport schools. So we are beginning to do research. This is a comparative study, not an evaluative one, but we are trying to compare how 2 top-performing schools approach the teaching of 21st century skills and capacities. So that is going to be going on this year and next year. And just in closing, I'll go back to one of those 5 pillars from the beginning. One of the things that was very important to us, and of course to Scarsdale and to all of you, is involving teachers and knowing that teachers are at the center of things. So as Richard Elmore said, most of the knowledge required for improvement must inevitably reside in those who deliver instruction. Then Michael Fullen asked the question, what motivates teachers to change their practice? And he answered, deep engagement with other colleagues, within an environment in which this is encouraged, rewarded, and pressed to happen. I guess I would say our Westport 2025 initiative, in a nutshell, is sort of exactly that. We have tried to create an environment in which, for all stakeholders, change is encouraged, rewarded, and pressed to happen. So, thank you very much.
Liz, Cindy, Elliott, thank you so much for presenting today. And I know as all of you sat through this presentation, I'm sure you saw just how much their 21st century vision and goals have immersed themselves in everything that they do. I think that last Venn diagram, that multi-Venn diagram that you showed really kind of captures how you can speak to a teacher in kindergarten, you can speak to a teacher in 12th grade, you can speak to students all across the board in any discipline, and everybody would know exactly what the vision and goal is in Westport. So thank you. We have a couple of minutes to take questions or comments on Liz's and Alex' presentation. And I know all your stomachs are growling at this point, I'm sure.
I apologize if I missed it. I was able to write down a lot of the thoughts from the presentation. I'm sorry. Did you touch on funding sources and?
We didn't have any.
Could you speak to everybody came in then?
We have our Board of Education, and Westport does support us well, but we didn't have any outside funding. But Elliot might answer that question in more detail.
The reality is that we do have excellent resources, but it's a struggle. You know, if I went to my board and asked them $50,000 for a Center for Innovation, and then asked them to add another 50 to it, they'd probably cancel my contract. I mean, they're thinking I've lost my mind. It just doesn't happen. So we scrounge around as best we can. We look for grants. We just received $1 million grant over a 3-year period for physical education from a technological perspective. So we have some really great people on our staff, and our director of phys ed and health, K-12, really went after this for years and was finally successful. But we're going to be integrating technology into physical education practice and changing our curriculum to focus more than ever on life skills and the long-term readiness for physical fitness and well-being. But
I guess I could add too, that the grant that we have it's from Singapore, that's a $100,000 grant to do this 2-year research study. But basically, it's been Board of Education funding, and they are, I would say, fiscally conservative.
Yeah, but responsibly so.
Yes.
Let's say your work is so impressive. How do you, what capacity do you have to communicate it to members of your community?
We actually need to start doing a better job on that. The 2 things that I mentioned, we had a community conversation just this past spring, inviting everybody to come out and find out about what is Westport 2025 all about, and we're going to do a parent university, trying to show them the kind of teaching for 21st century skills. But I think that is one of the areas that we need to work on in terms of better communication with the community. And Elliot, I think, is also going to respond to that.
I think one of the resources that isn't always tapped is the PTA. And we have incredibly supportive PTAs, and they get our message out, and they are advocates, true supporters. You know, we brought them into all of the functioning organically, if you will, and it's been good for us. They've just been great, and they in turn influence the board because they push on the board. We want more of this and more of this, and the board, even if some of them are reluctant, go along with it.